Hi everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a Dungeons & Dragons player that thinks his dungeon master can give him German citizenship for nefarious reasons. A story about a Warlock player that makes his character have a low con mod and gets upset when they are one-shotted, and much more. So without further ado, let's get into these DnD horror stories. Player cripples his own character and then blames the DM, by Reddit user Uzumaki420. Several months back, some friends and I started a weekly D&D night. It consisted of me, the DM, two other longtime friends, and the problem player, Warlock, who was the roommate of the friend who was hosting. This was Warlock's first time playing D&D. He was nice enough, but was also somewhat stubborn and did not want to take anyone's advice when creating his character. For example, he said he wanted to be a, quote, all-purpose caster, whatever that means, and decided to pick a warlock. The DM told him, rightly, that if he wanted a more diverse form of caster, he should consider a sorcerer or a wizard, because warlocks typically end up spamming Eldritch Blast for most of the game. He ignored DM's advice and took a warlock anyway. That is not too big of a deal, but here is where Warlock committed seppuku. He had given himself an 8 in Constitution. Naturally, when the DM saw that he was using Constitution as a dump stat, he very strongly recommended that he change that. Warlock, however, was not having it. His argument was that he was going to be on the backlines all the time, so he did not need a lot of HP. We all kept telling him that an 8 in Constitution was a delayed death sentence to his character, but he refused to hear it. We eventually just said screw it and decided to let him learn the hard way. The first few levels, he was just barely surviving, almost dying 4 times, so it was obvious that his character was on borrowed time. So fast forward a few months, and we are level 4 on Dragon of Icespire Peak. Warlock at this point had a maximum of 15 hit points, small enough for something like a dragon to one-shot him. During Dragon of Icespire Peak, whenever the party long rests or travels, the DM rolls a d20 to determine what location the dragon is at. Through our bad luck though, it spots us on our way to Butterskull Ranch, and combat starts. With further bad luck on initiative, Cryobane went first. Bad for us, because he was able to hit 3 of us with his ice breath for a total of 10 d8. All in all, it came out to 52 damage if you failed the save, which Warlock did. So he was dead. Not unconscious, dead. As in, he took enough damage to bypass his death saves. So it's at this point that Warlock was turning visibly red. For a second, I was extremely uncomfortable because I thought he was going to start crying. Instead, he just sat there, staring daggers at the DM like he just threatened his mother. DM could not have failed to notice and seemed to sense a tantrum coming. He tried to cut out ahead of it and started saying how it's no big deal, and he can just make a new character since we were very low level. He was very kind about it, and never once said, "I told you so." That is until Warlock blew up and started accusing DM of targeting him. To his further credit, our DM just silently sat there, calm as can be, while Warlock said he was a terrible DM, and how the DMs he watches on YouTube are so much better, and blah blah blah. After Warlock finally wore himself out, DM looked him dead in the eye and very calmly reminded him that the entire table, including the other new player, had warned him from the very beginning that an 8 in Con was a death sentence. I wish I could tell you all that he flipped the table before storming out, but what he did instead was so much more cringe. He did storm out of the room, but he went upstairs to his room instead. Moments later, we start hearing him blasting death metal out of his speakers at full volume, as if he was the king of edgelords. We tried to ignore it for about 30 minutes, but it was making the game very difficult to play. Eventually, his roommate went upstairs to reason with him. The only response he got was a thud when Warlock threw something at the door. We decided to just call it a night and hold game night at someone else's apartment next time. Needless to say, Warlock is not going to return. In DM's words, even if he apologizes, there's no place for that kind of toxicity at our table. It's incredible to me how a 25-year-old man is capable of behaving like a child who did not get his way, even after we warned him about this outcome from day one. Well, believe me, OP, there is no age too big for someone to act like a child and throw a tantrum. I once witnessed a man that had to have been in his late 50s throw a tantrum at Burger King because they ran out of barbecue sauce for his nuggets. And the amazing thing is, when people do this, they have no self-awareness and think that they are in the right, while everyone around them is just amazed at the toddler-like fashion that they are acting in. Like OP said, this was the player's own fault for not listening to the advice of his fellow players and DM, and just probably thinking he was the smartest player ever to create a character. But in his hubris, when his character inevitably got one shot, could not believe it could be possible, and that the only way that could have happened was the DM was targeting him. Then to run up to his room and intentionally blast music to ruin the rest of the game for everyone else also speaks to his maturity level, even though the DM handled him with kid gloves and tried to reassure him that he could make a new character. All in all, it is probably for the best that the DM banned him from any games after that, and that the group just holds the game at someone else's place. And hopefully, the game will continue strong and everyone will have a great adventure. Let's move on. Player upset because they tricked an NPC in Vampire the Masquerade, and then that NPC committed heinous crimes in return. By Reddit user Lily Birdie. So this is sort of going to be a question as well, because I'd like to know some opinions. I'm also not a player or DM in this scenario, but I've been hearing nonstop arguing about it from multiple people around me, so I said I'd reach out and ask more unbiased people. Violent themes ahead, obviously. Also, won't go into crazy detail, since I don't feel it's important, and I wasn't playing. Essentially, a player was tasked by a couple to find their baby that had been taken. In return, the player wanted them to, quote, spare her people from persecution. The player announced that they knew who had taken it and where they would be. Later, that player ended up saving the baby, and instead of returning it safely to its parents, sacrificed the baby's heart and drank its blood for a ritual, and did a lot of very heel-turn, chaotic evil things. They then returned the baby to the couple, but before showing them its state, asked, "So you remember our deal, right?" Then, upon hearing yes, proceeded to hand the deceased child over and told them, "You didn't say you wanted the child returned alive." The player's character being covered in blood and their cheeky remarks made the NPCs, rightfully so the DM believes, believe that the player was responsible due to the circumstances, resulting in a domino effect of violence and major events against the player's people. The player does not believe that they tricked the couple. They say that the person didn't make it clear that the child should be returned alive. Therefore, they broke their deal by attacking them afterwards and doing many violent things to their people. The player feels they were at no fault and that the DM metagames the couple's suspicions and persecution of the player. There's no argument about the player's role-playing abilities or their sudden turn of character. These things were all encouraged, and they've been told that, but they're insisting heavily and are upset about what happened still. The group has already moved past it, and played out more scenes beyond this one. But it's a nightmare that the player just keeps bringing up over and over to everyone they know. Opinions on this? Is the player or the DM at fault here? Or is there no fault? What could have prevented this from either side? This has potential to ruin their entire friendship and gaming group at this rate. Really? How is this even a question? Now, the closest I have gotten to playing Vampire the Masquerade is playing the video game on PC years ago, so I don't know the rules or the interpolitics between factions and such. But when someone hires you to get their baby back, I would say it's common sense that that would imply that the baby be alive on completion. I think the Game Master did the right thing by having the family be, let's just say, displeased. That player's argument is like him trying to play either a dumb character or some sort of evil genie that twists people's wishes due to exact wording. So yeah, I side with the Game Master in this story. Though, what do you all think? But before we move on to the next post, if you're enjoying the video, I have to ask that you give it a like and even share it if you could, as those things really help the video reach more people and thus help out the channel a lot. If not for me, then how about for Ziggy?
Yes. Do those things for Ziggy. Meow.
Now, you don't want to disappoint Ziggy, do you? But with that said, let's move on to the next post. Mom of one of my players almost gets him kicked out of my game. By Reddit user Sour Apple Friend. I run 2 D&D games. One, I run at a local game shop. It is family friendly, and I welcome anyone who can behave and take a shower. The second game is run at my house with me and my 4 oldest friends. We get drunk and screw around in the campaign. It's a campaign we have been running since 5th edition first came out, and is very much built around our terrible humor. Not very public play space friendly. New player is a nice 9-year-old kid named Simon. He loves playing in my public game and found out that I run another game. He asked if he could join, and I told him it wasn't really open to new players, and he was cool about it. Simon is a good kid. Simon's mom found out later when she picked him up and tried to force him into my other game. I had to get the owner to help me calm her down and get her to leave. Simon was in tears, apologizing. I felt so bad for him. The owner told Mom if she ever set foot in his store again, he'd ban her and Simon from the store and get the police involved if he had to. She left in a hurry and almost T-boned a car in her rush to leave. Simon's dad drops him off now. He came to me and the owner and begged our forgiveness. It turns out, Mom wanted Simon in my game as a form of babysitting, so she could go out and party with her other terrible mom friends. We told him, as long as it's him dropping Simon off, there won't be any issues. He's a good kid, and I'd hate to lose our monk. Well, first, good on OP for letting anyone join his game in the game store, and introducing the hobby to the next generation. And second, what a crappy mom. To try and force OP to let her son join his private game so she has a free babysitter in order to go out and get drunk just shows how much of a messed up home life Simon must have. So it is probably good that the kid has a bit of an escape by way of D&D, and at least has a decent dad to pick up the mantle of dropping him off to play. Some parents are just not fit to be parents, and it sounds like Simon's mom is one of those parents. So good on OP and Simon's dad for this story. Anyway, let's move on to the next post. World's dumbest D&D player tries to use me to get German citizenship for a messed up reason. by Reddit user DnD CK3fan. This happened a couple months ago. I was playing D&D on Discord with a couple of friends and friends of friends. After our last DM lost interest and ended the campaign, I decided to DM for them. I announced that we were going to do a new campaign on our group Discord server. One lurker, I will call him Jerry for the purposes of the story, asked if I was German, as I had a German word in my username, and I said yes, because I am German American. He then said he wanted to play with us. Well, that seems a bit odd. I started the campaign about 2 weeks later. It was a post-steampunkish world, a century after an apocalypse. Jerry rolled up an elf paladin girl with, quote, chibi eyes and a, quote, passion for the purity of her race, which checked out for a sorcerer, I guess. But how? He unfortunately ended up being as much of an edgelord as you'd expect, mixed in with a bunch of rules lawyer type BS that he would erroneously invoke to get away with all kinds of shenanigans. Examples? One time, he murdered a human and his half-elf kids, and then tried to kidnap their mom as a slave to breed her for pure-blood elves. Holy crap, taking that racial purity thing to an extreme, huh? I ended up stopping him from doing any of that by threatening to make him an Oathbreaker paladin with no powers, and he tried to argue that he is following his oath to uphold his racial purity oaths, something I told him no god would recognize, and he eventually backed down. He would also, throughout the campaign, randomly talk about how much he loves Germany and is dying to go, and how much he loved German art, culture, and history. Nothing wrong with that, but he would drop it so randomly that it felt like he was pandering. Part of me also worried that his character's obsession with racial purity was an indicator that he loved Germany for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, it is starting to seem that way. Well, about a month into the campaign, after this one session in which he leveled up, and I, during the session, remarked on how we had all become friends. So afterwards, Elves Paladin's player stayed late and said how glad he was that we had become friends. He then said how much he would like to be able to hang out with me more outside of D&D. I said, that sounds like a good idea. Maybe after the next session, we can all make some plans to see a movie. Now, I imagine OP means watch a movie together on Discord, as I'm sure all the other players live in different areas. Then he says, I meant just you and me, bro. I'm thinking about moving down to Germany anyway. If I had a sponsor, I could become a German citizen, and we could hang out all the time. I was silent, with awkward confusion for a second, and then I stuttered to say, that's not how that works. Plus, I don't let... This is when he cut me off and said, Germany's new nationalization law allows for foreigners to gain citizenship easier. I just need you to help me out. Come on, be my sponsor. Wait, what? I then said, even if that is how that works, which I doubt, I am not a German citizen. Why do you want to move there so badly anyway? He then said, wait a minute, you said you were German. I then told him, yeah, my dad's side of the family is from Bavaria, but he's an American citizen. He then got enraged and accused me of deceiving him and called me the F-slur out of nowhere. Well, that is no way to treat friends. And also, couldn't this player tell that OP wasn't from Germany just from a lack of an accent? As I'm sure OP likely grew up in the States. I then said, even if I was a German citizen, I highly doubt I could just get you citizenship because some dude I play D&D with wants it. Again, why do you want this so bad that you're doing all this? I asked because, honestly, at this point, I was thinking my worst fears in the back of my head were true, and he was some kind of Nazi weeaboo, keeping it real. It sure does seem like it, with the way he played his character. He then went quiet for a second, and then said, "Well, America is too strict on certain laws." I ask him what kind of laws, and he just replies with, "Sexual laws." Well, I can't say I was expecting that. We go back and forth as I prod him, and eventually he admits that he wants German citizenship because, according to him, the age of consent is 14 in Germany. He thought he could get it from me, so he joined my D&D game to befriend me because he erroneously thought that the new German act to modernize nationalization that was passed this year somehow meant that I could sponsor him to become a German citizen, and that he would renounce his American one to avoid legal trouble in the US. So, not a Nazi, just a perv. I didn't say anything after this admission. I just kicked him from the server and blocked him. I told the rest of the group that he wouldn't be coming back, and I had his character stay behind in the last town we were in. Thankfully, nobody asked because I didn't feel like explaining it at the time. It just left a weird taste in my mouth. This is honestly my first time talking about it, and it's just so insane to think about someone that obnoxiously stupid that he thought his DM could get him German citizenship for the sole purpose of banging underage girls, also apparently had this whole complex scheme planned out. Well, that certainly is a story. Something tells me that this player wasn't the sharpest bulb in the garage. Like I said earlier, you would think that the player would be able to tell that OP wasn't from Germany just based on the lack of an accent, let alone that they all played D&D together, and there would be a major difference in time zones. To hatch this whole scheme to move to Germany just because the age of consent there is 14, which it actually is, as I googled it, is a pretty big reach. And then thinking about how the player worded it as, quote, "to avoid legal troubles," gives me the creeps, as that alludes to him already doing that here in the States. I don't blame OP for just kicking this dude out of the Discord and blocking him after. Now, I realize that cultures differ from one another, but in my honest opinion, 14 is way too young to consent to anything. And the fact that this dude befriended OP just so he could maybe move to Germany just for that is just, well, gross. I think we need a dose of kitty after that story. There we go. That is a bit better. Now we can move on to the next post. Am I too sensitive, or is my experienced DM sister being rude? Submitted to the D&D Doge subreddit by Reddit user Melantartfa. I've been DMing for about a year. A few months ago, my sister, who is younger than me but has years of DM experience, lived with my family and I for a while she and her new husband were looking for a place to move to. I told her I had been DMing a D&D campaign while using a DM PC. She immediately got on me, saying that I shouldn't have done that because she felt I wasn't ready for it. I explained that she was loved by the party and I was avoiding the common traps of a DM PC. She then proceeded to ask me more about the campaign, so I showed her a picture of the party that one of the members had drawn. For context, our party consisted of a Leonin fighter who had recently double-classed as a paladin because of plot reasons, a tiefling bard, a homebrew Bernin barbarian who had recently double-classed into a druid, an Aarakocra gunslinger fighter, a human bard, a Water Genasi blood hunter, a Goliath fighter, and finally was my character, a Furbolg druid who had recently double-classed as a ranger. My sister looked at the picture and with this cringing voice asked me, "Why is most of your party furries?" I explained that it was what the party wanted, and she accepted that, even though, as much as I can tell, she hated it. She then asked me if anybody had died yet, to which I responded no. What she said next feels like she crossed the line. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Nobody has died yet? You're a bad DM." The next 2 days, I fell into a depression. My party reassured me that I wasn't a bad DM because everyone was having fun, but I wanted opinions from other people. Am I a bad DM, or am I being overly sensitive? Well, I would say no to both of those questions. It sounds like OP Sister has a bit of tabletop RPG elitism, and is one of those that play D&D and will jump at the chance to criticize anyone new to the game. To say that OP is a bad dungeon master just because nobody died yet in OP's game just tells me that OP Sister plays the game with a DM versus player mentality. And just because half of the players are playing beast-like characters doesn't mean that they are furries. It is a fantasy world after all. And as far as the DMPC goes, I will say that it sounds like OP has a decently sized group where DMPC isn't really required. But as it sounds, OP has avoided the horror stories that can come with DMPCs in a group, and the group is actually having fun. And in the end, that is all that matters in any tabletop RPG, like D&D. So my advice would be to not let your sister get to you with those comments, and just keep having fun with your friends. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.